Poland spent 40 years fielding a Soviet infantry fighting vehicle it inherited by default, and the Borsuk is what it built to replace it. The BWP-1, Poland's version of the BMP-1, entered service in 1973, designed in the 1960s, with armor thin enough to be penetrated by heavy machine gun fire at close range. Its main gun struggled against modern armored vehicles, and its amphibious capability was considered adequate when the primary threat was a land war across the North European plain, fought by soldiers who hadn't yet been born when the vehicle first rolled off the production line. That vehicle was still in Polish service when this story begins. Here's the thing. Poland has since signed the largest single defense contract in its history, worth more than 10 billion euros across its full scope, to replace a vehicle that should have been retired before most of its current operators finished primary school. But the replacement they built wasn't an off-the-shelf Western product. It wasn't a licensed copy of something proven in a foreign army. It's entirely Polish-designed, Polish-built, and now being marketed to the world, and countries that could easily buy from Germany, Sweden, or South Korea are looking seriously at Warsaw instead. So why is that happening, and why now? The BWP-1 problem was never uniquely Polish. It was a symptom of something much wider across NATO's Eastern membership. When the Cold War ended, those countries inherited fleets of Soviet equipment and spent the following decades in the comfortable assumption that urgent replacement could wait because the threat had receded. Poland had the BWP-1, Romania had the ML-184, Slovakia had the BVP-2. These vehicles were old, but they functioned, budgets were constrained, and alliance membership felt like a security guarantee in itself, which meant the political will to fund large-scale rearmament simply wasn't there. And then, February 2022 arrived. Without leaning on that event as a shorthand for everything that followed, what it demonstrated about infantry fighting vehicles specifically was this. BMP family vehicles that had survived on institutional inertia for decades were now visibly, publicly inadequate. The threat environment they were designed to survive no longer resembled the one actually putting soldiers at risk. Drone-delivered munitions, long-range anti-tank guided missiles, and the density of modern battlefield fires meant that vehicles with thin armor and limited weapon elevation weren't just obsolete. They were liabilities. Romania launched a competition for up to 298 new infantry fighting vehicles with a budget somewhere between 2.5 and 3 billion euros. Brazil began evaluating options for 78 tracked infantry fighting vehicles under its VBC Fuse program. Country after country looked at its own BWP-1 equivalent and quietly started running the same calculation, and that is when the queue for Western infantry fighting vehicles got very long, very fast. Which brings us to the Borsuk, and the reason its timing is almost suspiciously convenient. The Borsuk program didn't begin as a response to any of this. Back in 2013, Poland's Ministry of Defense launched a competition through the National Center for Research and Development, with a straightforward requirement: replace the BWP-1 with something amphibious, modern, and built in Poland. The Huta Stalowa Wola Consortium 1 received a grant of 62 million zloty from the NCBR and started work on a vehicle that wouldn't see serial production approval for nearly a decade. What followed wasn't a smooth development arc. The technology demonstrator appeared at MSPO, Poland's defense exhibition in Kielce in September 2017, got improved, appeared again in 2019, went through field trials at Drosko Training Ground, and passed factory, military, and qualification testing before receiving production approval in 2022. 9 years from competition to production clearance. In defense procurement terms, that's actually not bad. It also meant that by the time the vehicle was ready, the strategic environment had transformed entirely around it. The Borsuk is a 28-ton tracked vehicle whose crew of 3 operates through an unmanned turret, the ZSSW-30, co-developed by HSW and the WB Group, the same turret that already equips Poland's KTO Rosomak, the 8x8 wheeled infantry fighting vehicle already in Polish Army service. That's not a trivial point. It means the ZSSW-30's core systems, including optics supplied by Polish company PCOSA, have already accumulated operational hours in a fielded platform, giving the Borsuk's turret a degree of validation that a brand new design wouldn't carry. The main armament is a 30mm Mark 44S Bushmaster II autocannon, the same gun family used by the US Army, firing at 200 rounds per minute with a ready-to-fire load of 300 rounds, one of the largest first-stage ammunition capacities among NATO infantry fighting vehicles. The 30mm ammunition itself is produced domestically by Mesko SA, Poland's state-owned ammunition manufacturer, closing the supply chain loop for the vehicle's primary weapon system. It also carries dual Spike LR anti-tank guided missiles, manufactured by Israel's Rafael, with a maximum range of 4.5 kilometers in fire and forget mode, alongside a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun. But here's the part that matters most in the current environment. The cannon elevates to plus 60 degrees. That's not a standard figure. Most infantry fighting vehicles are designed to engage threats roughly at ground level, but an elevation ceiling of plus 60 degrees means the crew can track and engage drones, slow aircraft, and helicopters. That capability was built in deliberately, drawing directly from analysis of how infantry engagements had evolved, because a vehicle with 1970s elevation limits is poorly equipped for a battlefield where the most common threat now arrives from above. Protection reaches Steinag 4569 level 4 at the front and level 3 on the sides, with modular composite and ceramic add-on plates and an active protection system integration option, specifically designed around the Polish-developed Zaslon APS, an active protection system developed domestically to defeat rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank guided missiles. The vehicle crosses water at 8 kilometers per hour, maintains a road speed of 65 kilometers per hour on land, and runs on composite rubber tracks supplied by Canada's Soucy Defence rather than traditional steel links, which reduces both its acoustic and thermal signatures. The engine is a German MTU diesel producing 720 horsepower. The missiles are Israeli, the tracks are Canadian, and the gun is American-derived, which means almost every critical component originates from a NATO-allied supplier. For export customers who need confidence that their vehicle won't be politically stranded if supply chains shift, that sourcing architecture is not a minor detail. Forget the vehicle for a moment. Consider what the Borsuk chassis actually represents. The same platform, designated the Universal Modular Tracked Platform, underpins at least 6 distinct variants. An NBC reconnaissance vehicle called Ares, a medical evacuation variant called Gotem, a 120mm mortar carrier drawing on the RAK program, and an armored recovery vehicle called Gekon. A country buying the Borsuk isn't purchasing a single product. It's acquiring an entire vehicle family from one production line, on one logistical architecture, and for a mid-sized military trying to replace multiple Soviet-era systems simultaneously, that breadth of offer changes the economics of the whole conversation. On February 28, 2023, Poland's armaments agency signed a framework agreement with Huta Stalowa Wola for up to 1,000 infantry fighting vehicles and 400 auxiliary variants, with a total program value exceeding 10 billion euros, making it one of the largest single defense contracts ever placed in Poland. The first executive contract followed on March 27, 2025, covering 111 vehicles for 6.57 billion zloty, approximately 1.8 billion US dollars, with deliveries scheduled between 2025 and 2029. A second contract, signed May 30, 2026, added another 146 vehicles for 7.5 billion zloty, with completion by 2030. The first 15 serial production Borsuks were handed over to Poland's 15th Mechanized Brigade on December 4, 2025, a world premiere moment for Polish indigenous infantry fighting vehicle production, the first time a domestically designed and built infantry fighting vehicle had entered Polish Army service. Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz attended the ceremony, and his stated ambition was straightforward: "I would like Borsuk to become our export hit." That ambition has a foundation worth examining. Poland recorded defense spending of 4.5% of GDP in 2025, confirmed by SIPRI in April 2026 as the highest proportion in the entire NATO alliance, amounting to $46.8 billion for the year, with projections pointing toward 4.8% in 2026. At that level of investment, Poland isn't simply rebuilding its own military. It's constructing the industrial capacity to supply others, and every vehicle it produces for its own army functions as a reference sale. Every test result, every field evaluation, every operational deployment by Polish soldiers generates evidence that the product actually works under real conditions. Now consider what that means for the 10% that separates adequate from decisive. Romania's infantry fighting vehicle competition remains ongoing, with the Borsuk competing against the CV-90, the KF-41 Lynx, the AS-21 Redback, and the Ascod II. All of those platforms carry more history. The CV-90 has been operational since 1993. The Lynx is a proven export product from a major industrial nation. The Redback arrives backed by South Korea's considerable manufacturing push. Against that field, the Borsuk carries no legacy, no combat record, and no confirmed export contract. What it does carry is this: it was designed by a country that shares a border with the conflict driving the demand in the first place. Every requirement that shaped the Borsuk, the anti-drone elevation, the modular protection levels, the amphibious capability, the NATO-sourced components, was written by a military that treats the threat not as a planning scenario, but as a practical reality. That's a different kind of credential, and in a competition room where every platform is being stress-tested against the same evolving threat picture, the origin of the design philosophy matters. To be direct about the Borsuk's weaknesses because they're real. No combat record exists. Protection claims haven't been validated under fire. The production ramp-up is deliberately measured. 15 vehicles delivered in 2025, only 3 in 2026, 33 in 2027, and 55 across 2028 and 2029 under the first contract. A country shopping for urgent operational capacity won't find immediate scale here. Norway evaluated the Borsuk in its 2021 infantry fighting vehicle competition and selected the CV-90 instead, and that loss carries weight because Norwegian procurement trials are rigorous and the result wasn't close. And yet, at the IDEB exhibition in Bratislava in May 2026, PGZ unveiled an export variant of the Borsuk fitted with a Slovak-made Tura 30 V9 turret, developed in partnership with EVPU. PGZ First Vice President Arkadiusz Bach described the offering as a proven, modern, and flexible solution that can effectively meet the needs of the armed forces of many countries. The partnership with Slovakia is deliberate, giving the platform a second national endorsement and opening doors to markets where a Polish-only procurement pitch might face political friction. It's a quiet acknowledgement that competing globally requires thinking beyond your own production line. Brazil is evaluating the Borsuk for 78 vehicles under the VBC FUZ program. Reports from early 2024 referenced South Korean interest, though no official announcement followed, and that interest remains unverified. Romania's competition will likely define how the export story develops from here. A contract win in Bucharest against established Western competitors with longer track records would reframe the Borsuk's international standing entirely. The broader picture Poland is assembling deserves to be stated plainly. It's spending more on defense as a share of its economy than any other NATO member. It's building a domestic defense industry capable of producing vehicles that allied nations want to buy. It's partnering with neighboring countries to create joint export products designed for the same threat environment every potential customer is now scrambling to prepare for. And all of this arrives on the back of a vehicle that spent 9 years in development while the world slowly arranged itself into exactly the conditions that would make it relevant. The BWP-1 entered Polish service in 1973, and Poland is now fielding its homegrown replacement 52 years later, selling it internationally and building variants of it across an entire platform family. Whether the Borsuk becomes the export success its backers want depends on questions that are genuinely open: production scale, combat validation over time, and competition from manufacturers with deeper pockets and longer histories. None of those questions have clean answers yet. But the question that opened this video was why so many countries are paying serious attention to a vehicle from a nation that, a generation ago, was itself a customer rather than a supplier. The answer is that Poland did something unusual. It spent a decade building a product for its own military, got the timing exactly wrong by conventional wisdom, and exactly right by historical accident. The threat arrived just as the vehicle was ready. The queue for established alternatives stretched long enough to make a newcomer look credible, and the design philosophy behind the platform happened to anticipate precisely what modern battlefields are demanding. Deputy Defense Minister Pavel Bezda, speaking at the December 2025 delivery ceremony, described it simply. The Borsuk gives soldiers a sense of security. That's not a technical specification, it's a consequence, and it's the one that matters most to the people who will actually be sitting inside it when it counts. Romania's competition hasn't concluded. Brazil's evaluation is still running. The full 1,400 vehicle program won't be complete until 2035. When the export picture clarifies, this channel will cover it, and if that's the kind of story you want followed properly, stay subscribed because the next chapter of this one is already in motion.